Hey everyone, so it's Hearth and welcome back to my channel. On today's video we're talking about your unpopular witchcraft opinions. Previously on my channel, I've done a few episodes on unpopular opinions. Some of them have been mine, the rest of them have been my subscribers. Now, these videos are not designed to shame anyone for their opinions, it's simply about opening up a conversation and really talking about where these opinions have come from and looking inwards to figure out whether or not we agree with them. It's quite likely that a lot of these opinions you will agree on, and they aren't necessarily unpopular in the eyes of magical practitioners, but they're often unpopular in the eyes of social media witchcraft. If you have any unpopular opinions that haven't been in any previous video, feel free to let me know down in the comment section, and I might just feature them in the next episode. So with that being said, let's get into the opinions. Up first, we have, there are so many toxic spaces within the witchcraft community, and it's honestly a serious problem. This one I completely agree with, and I don't even think it's that unpopular. I think it's just been so normalized that this happens that we don't recognize that it's an issue anymore. This doesn't just happen in the witchcraft community, it happens in every community. Online, we can see it in social media spaces because people can often hide behind usernames and profile pictures, but we do also see this in person. It can vary from very subtle, uncomfortable comments about you and your magical practice all the way up to things that can cause people serious harm. I've heard of people having covens tell them that they need to stop their medication and replace it with natural substitutes, otherwise their magic will stop working, which is not only just straight up wrong, it's also incredibly dangerous. I've also known of people be excluded from groups because of who they are, whether it's their identity or their sexual orientation, and I think it's something that we really need to stand up for a little bit. Just because it's commonplace doesn't make it right, and especially when we're looking at younger individuals in the community who've grown up with social media, they're having to deal with so many additional pressures on their magical practice than I ever did, and the majority of people who came before me never did as well. So it's one that I think a lot of us can accept as being true, even if we don't necessarily speak about it. Next up, we have, my unpopular opinion is that just because a certain colour is used for a specific purpose, such as purple is for psychic abilities, wisdom and calmness, doesn't always have to be that way. I think that if you're doing a particular working and you need to use a yellow candle but your gut is saying, no, use an orange candle, I say use the orange candle. I believe that your intuition and gut feeling is stronger than anything else. Now, this is very much one that I think is going to split people, and it's going to entirely depend on whether you are a solitary practitioner or whether you are working with others, and whether you're in any set traditions or religions that require you to have certain colour correspondences or other symbolic correspondences as well. Now, when it comes to the colour correspondences, these are just a series that have been created especially within the time of Wicca, and these colour correspondences are not going to align for everyone. So a good example of this would be prosperity. For a lot of people within the community, they see prosperity as being green and gold. And yeah, that makes sense, right? Green and gold. Money and abundance, growth, development, all of these things. And yet in other cultures and traditions, these colour correspondences completely vary. Red is often the colour of prosperity, not green, and so it's really important that we don't limit ourselves to a set list that someone has created, and if it works for them, that's amazing, as it works for many other people, but that doesn't mean it has to be something that you use. Obviously, if you're part of a set tradition, religion, or group that uses certain colour correspondences, then yeah, you should probably use the colour correspondences that are associated with these things within your tradition. However, if you're a solitary practitioner that isn't attached to any pre-existing group, you can really play around and see what works best with colour correspondences. And also, these are going to be very deeply rooted in our life and our life experiences. And so for some people, pink might mean self-love, whereas for other people, pink might mean passion. And that's going to be deeply rooted in their relationships with people and perhaps the things that they experienced in their life. Another way to look at it is if you're working with deities, spirits, or ancestors, their colour correspondence might be different than yours. It might be based off their time period or what they resonate with and connect with. They might ask for something really specific, and if a spirit, deity, or ancestor has asked for something very, very specific, don't try to alter that too much. Stick with it because that's specifically what they're asking for. And over time, you'll come to realize that within spells and rituals, some things are core components that need to stay the same, and other things can be edited, altered, and adapted to suit your specific associations. And with a bit of playing around with it, you can really figure out the basics of that spell casting, so you can tweak it even further from there on. And that's something that just comes with time and playing around with it. And while I am one to say that I'd recommend doing research before diving into spells and rituals, I also think there's something to be said about giving it a go and seeing what happens. So if you feel like you need to use an orange candle instead of a red, give it a go, note it down, keep a journal of all of your magical practice, and when you do that ritual again, try a yellow candle. Are the results better? Are the results worse? Did they happen quicker? Did they happen in a different way? And then you can make your own colour correspondence, because ultimately that's what's happened. The colour correspondence that exists, that we see a lot, has come from someone who has done a lot of trial and error, and probably lots of someones who have worked together to come up with some kind of system. But that system isn't always the same everywhere, and that's something that we do have to remember. And yet there are a lot of people, especially online, who will stand very, very strongly by the fact that we have to use exactly the colour correspondence. But it takes out all nuance from magical practice, which is what makes magical practice so unique for each person. The next opinion is really similar to the last, so some of my opinions are definitely going to align with it. This says, symbolism is personal. In my experience, the perception of the exact same symbol can vary dramatically from one person to another. How the symbol is going to affect your working depends first and foremost on how you personally perceive it. Yes. Yes. This one I 100% agree with. And this is what I mean when I say that a lot of these opinions I don't necessarily think are that unpopular. I think they're just not commonly spoken about. I get a lot of people sending me messages asking to interpret a particular candle working and the symbols left in wax, to interpret a particular dream or a tea leaf reading. But the ultimate reality is that I don't know you, and I don't know why those symbols came through for you, because I've not got your lived experience. And there are so many books out there proclaiming to be dream dictionaries and everything you could possibly know about symbols, but ultimately the core meaning of that symbol lies with you. Now, the example I use a lot, especially in the live streams, is a shark. A lot of people, when they think of sharks, they think of danger, of imminent harm, of fear. But when I see a shark, it's exciting. It's something that's going to intellectually intrigue me, something I can deep dive into. The shark is not a negative symbol for me. It's a positive one. And that means that if I read someone else's tea leaves and I see a shark, it's going to mean something very, very different to me than perhaps it would to you. This can be because of so many factors, how we grew up, even where we grew up, as well as the job that you do, the education that you have in the particular aspect that you have it in, and your lived experiences with family and friend relationships, romantic relationships, children. All of this stuff is going to impact how you perceive symbols. An example for this would be that if growing up you had a really bad experience with a spider that could have really done you harm, your experience of that symbol is going to be very different from someone who's never had a negative experience with a spider in their life. You're going to have very different reactions to that animal, and so that's going to completely change the outcome of that reading. This also applies to adding symbolism into spells and rituals. While some things are nice to utilize, like numerology and color symbolism, it doesn't mean that those things are going to be the same for every single person, and ultimately it's going to fall on you and your experiences to figure out whether that's something you want to add into a working or not. If you're working a spell with your romantic partner to help magnify the love and affection in that relationship, a lot of spells are going to call for rose petals. But if you associate the rose with death because you see it at every single funeral you've ever been to, then perhaps a rose is not something you want to add into a working, that you want to magnify and improve the love that you have, because then you might alter the outcome of that working because of your association with that symbolism. It's all something that we really need to take into account, and really, I think we need to be more free within our magical practice. It's not wrong to change a spell that you find in a book. It's not wrong to do things differently than you see online. It's your magical practice, and so what works for you is top priority. There's no point in doing a spell that someone else has done if it's not going to work for you. So change things up, mix things up, change the symbolism if you need to, create your own symbolism with trial and error, and find what works best for you. This unpopular opinion is one that I definitely agree with. Most things that happen to people have mundane reasons and not magical. That's why I feel it's important to eliminate the mundane before moving to the magical. Yes, completely. Balance is so important within witchcraft. Going to either extreme is not going to be healthy for you or your magical practice. In regards to this opinion, a lot of people, especially when they're just starting out, can go really far to the magical side, and they will completely remove any mundane aspect from their workings. This can actually hinder your magical practice, not help it, because if you don't have any mundane foundation for that magic to attach onto, it's just going to be floating around. So if you really want to get a promotion, but you're not working towards that promotion in any way, and you're actually not putting any effort into it at all, you can do as many spells as you want, but it's not got anything to attach onto. Whereas if you were to do the mundane work and the magical, then you've got something solid that spell can attach onto, and you're more likely to find success. I've also noticed that within some people who go all the way to the magical end of that spectrum, they often do it as a way to shirk responsibility for their actions. It isn't that they were mean to their friend and they need to apologise, it was actually the Mercury retrograde that made them act mean, so it's not actually their fault. Or if they failed to get the job that they were after, it's not because they didn't try hard enough or put in any of the effort. It was actually because they were cursed, and that's the reason why they didn't get that job. It's really important that we have that grounding balance in it, where we can recognize when there might be spirit attachments, we can recognize where there might be astrological factors in play, but we're also able to recognize that the Mercury retrograde didn't make you say those mean things to your friend. It might have influenced the scenario, but you still said those things. And so that's really important to bear in mind. At the other end of the spectrum, however, are people who tend to prioritize the mundane over the magical. And while this isn't inherently bad, I mean, plenty of people do it, it is simply that they will often undermine their own magical practice. A lot of people consider magic to be spiritual aid, whereas others will consider it more psychological placebo. But at the end of the day, regardless of whether it is a placebo or spiritual aid, if that works for you, it works for you. And it doesn't need to be reduced down to its scientific components. You can enjoy it without having to believe all the spiritual aspect to it. It's just important not to undermine your own magical practice by constantly picking apart everything that you do to find this core meaning to it, this core basis that makes things work. Even if something works by a placebo, that works, and that is just as powerful as someone who works with the spirits to gain a magical response. The most important thing is that you get that magical response and it benefits your life. And that's the main goal in all of this. It's really important that what we are doing as magical practitioners is having a positive impact on our lives. If it's causing us physical, spiritual, emotional, energetic distress, then that's something that we really need to look at to make sure that we are doing all that we can to benefit our own lives and the lives of the people around us, so that we aren't harming other people because of our own spiritual practice and so on and so forth. Balance is really, really important, and I think this comment really only emphasized that to me. The next unpopular opinion is a pretty long one, but I think it has some really good points. This one says, on one hand, the fact that witchcraft and the occult have become more accessible to anyone has led to the pagan renewal and the possibility to rediscover spirituality. On the other, this very thing has had many negative consequences, for example, the oversimplification of spirituality or bringing it down to just a cool Instagram post for some likes, and in general losing sight of the real purpose of it, not to mention that the fact that the witchcraft/pagan community online is often very toxic, which brings us back to that first unpopular opinion. Breaking down our conditioning is very hard, and now people are learning witchcraft mainly from social media. Tumblr, Discord, Facebook, and Instagram are modern grimoires. You can learn a lot from discourse, but you need the intuition and time to develop skill into anything. Things like emoji magic, selling sigils for exorbitant prices, and doing purely online covens are not the way to learn and attune with actual magic and the forces of ancient nature. Put your hands to the dirt and scream to the storms. Meditate in the graveyard, push the boundaries of your beliefs and conditioning, love and be kind to yourself, but challenge yourself as well. Getting out of your comfort zone breaks your conditioning. So yeah, this one is another one that I get. I get it, and I don't think it's that unpopular. I think it's just not that popular with younger people coming into the practice. And I think that's largely because they've never had the chance to experience anything different. Since about 2020, we've seen a massive spike in the popularity of witchcraft. It was obviously happening before that point, but it definitely peaked in around late 2020, early 2021. And this is something that happens time and time again. We see peaks and troughs in the popularity of witchcraft. And the bonus of this is that when it gets really, really popular, a lot of people join the practice, and when it becomes less popular again, the people who are really interested, they stick around. Everyone else finds something different, finds something new that they enjoy, joins a new trend. And I don't think that's inherently bad. This happens with every community. You'll get peaks and troughs in popularity. What is a problem, however, is that people are relying on social media, and especially during 2020, understandably so, there were no group activities that people could join. There was really nothing that people could participate in that wasn't online. And so people have come to rely on TikTok, on Instagram, on YouTube even, for their magical knowledge. And I'll be the first one to say it. Please don't use me as your sole source of magical information. I am not the be-all end-all of magical knowledge, and neither is anybody else. It's really important that any information you gather online, you're implementing into your practice, adapting it, changing it, completely removing it if you find that you don't like it, and making your practice your own. And it's something that I'm not seeing quite so much on social media as I have seen in group environments in person. And I think that's a big difference here, because I've spent time both with in-person groups of witches and also online. And the distinction tends to be in how workings are carried out. Social media can't show energy work. It isn't something that we can really experience via a YouTube video. And so a lot of beginners aren't learning the foundational practices that you would learn in a group setting in the real world, in the physical environment. And so you're finding a lot of practitioners are focusing only on physical items and physical spells. Lots of jar spells, lots of jewelry spells, these kind of things that you can physically touch and or look at on a TikTok video or an Instagram reel or a YouTube video. And in person, you tend to have more of a focus on the energy work. You're training that energy work with other people, so you're experiencing their energy and vice versa. And I find that people's practice varies dramatically depending on which environment you've spent a lot of time in. And alongside this, it is important to add that not everyone has the luxury of being in an in-person group environment. That isn't something everyone is able to do. If you have the chance, it's an amazing environment, but I just think that even if you are only able to do things online, look at everything really carefully, think about it, do some research in other aspects, talk to other magical practitioners, read a few books on the subject, and try to grow from there, because there is definitely something different about online witchcraft than in-person witchcraft. And there's definitely a new commercialization on witchcraft. We're seeing mainstream shops coming out with witchcraft products. We're seeing, as I'm going to be talking about in a little bit, really big companies coming out with witchcraft products that are not only harmful to the environment, but also to people. And a lot of beginners wanting a lot of items that they see on TikTok or Instagram for their own practice. And it's almost like a sped up version of magical tradition. When I started magical practice, I had a few magical tools, and that was it. I had like a little tiny cauldron, I had a chalice, and then a few years later I got an athame. That's not something we're seeing quite the same anymore. We're seeing this almost sped up approach to witchcraft where instead of having to learn for a year before practicing, people are just going straight into practice. Instead of learning what you want to utilize when it comes to magical tools, people are just buying them all really, really quick. It's definitely a different environment now. And so it's definitely worth kind of taking a step back from that, slowing down a little bit and rooting your practice in the magical physical world and not just the magical digital world. And that doesn't mean going to groups. It just means taking some time in your environment by yourself to experience that energy and that magic of place rather than just the magic that we see online. The next unpopular opinion is definitely one that is going to divide some of you depending on personal opinion, and it's a little bit strangely worded. So it says, you must be a vegan to be a respected witch. Witches 500 years ago used leather, ate chicken, eggs, and drank milk. Why have we adopted the belief that all of that is now wrong? So this one, honestly, I get what they're saying, and I don't think it actually has anything to do with diet choice at all. The thing that I find to be uncomfortable about the context of this opinion is that in the last 10, 20 years, people are saying you are not a respectable witch if. And usually that if implies that you have to follow what that person is doing in order to be a respectable, a real witch or magical practitioner. And it completely disregards thousands of years of magical history, not just witchcraft history, because magical arts go far beyond just witchcraft. Different traditions, cultures, religions all around the world have practiced magical arts for thousands of years, and they all have variations in diet, in belief, in traditions. Individuals within those traditions are going to have their own diets and opinions and stances on things, and this is something that's happened successfully for thousands of years. So why is it that all of a sudden people are now saying that in order to be a real, or in order to be a respectable witch, you have to do exactly what a group of people are doing, when it just removes all nuance and all diversity among magical practitioners? And if anything, that is a massive issue. Ultimately, it doesn't matter what diet you choose to have. That's a personal choice. We see this mindset of you aren't a real, or your magic won't work if, happening in so many ways. I've seen it when it comes to gender, when it comes to sexual orientation. I've seen it discussed that people can't perform successful magic if they're on medication, which I'm really hoping that collectively we can all agree is absolute nonsense. And it basically just comes down to the idea that people are only respectable in your eyes if they do the same as you, which just isn't the case. Everyone is different, everyone is diverse. The magical community is incredibly diverse. And I don't think we can lose that. I don't think we should lose that. That diversity is really, really beautiful. And so I don't think this is that unpopular, but I also don't think it's actually related to diet. I think it's more related to the mindset of certain groups within the community. And actually really similar to the last opinion is this one. So many other practitioners say that you aren't a witch if you order your ingredients for a spell, that real witches harvest their own ingredients, and while picking your own herbs is better because you have it at its most powerful, you do not have to pick your own herbs for a spell. Yeah, I completely agree, and it's another one of those that only shows that there are certain groups within the magical community that are, as the first unpopular opinion stated, not that nice and are actually really hurtful and completely disregard that not everyone is in the same situation. When it comes to harvesting herbs, while it would be amazing for every single practitioner to have a garden where they could grow their own plants and go out and harvest their own herbs, this isn't something that everyone is able to do for so many reasons. And if anything, I think it shows a level of privilege in the community to say to someone that they are not a real practitioner if they don't have that space, if they don't have that mobility, if they don't have that time. And you aren't less of a practitioner if you don't have that space or that time or that mobility. There are so many reasons why people can't do this. And so if you want to work with plants within your magical practice, there are so many online witchcraft stores where you can check the sustainability, the region of where different plants are harvested. You can get it from people who understand what they're working with and connect with the plants that they are selling. You can also get them from other magical practitioners. There are plenty of people out there who have way too many rose petals for their harvest to be able to use in a year, and so they share or sell them with other members of the magical community. It's really not fair or right to say that you aren't a real practitioner because that if is usually caused by so many different things. There are plenty of practitioners out there who live in flats that can only grow a few select plants inside and don't have massive amounts of outdoor space. There are plenty of people who live in an environment where it isn't safe for them to be open about their magical practice. And so how do you explain the fact that you have hundreds of plants with different properties that you work with in spells and rituals? It just isn't doable. If you've got pets that are allergic to a lot of plants out there, that's not safe either. If you have mobility difficulties, you might not be able to go into the woodland and forage your own plants, but that doesn't make you less of a magical practitioner. The only time, in my opinion, that this can become a problem is if you are completely neglecting every plant in your own area and you are buying in plants that are not sustainably sourced, not sustainably harvested from far off countries that are then having to be imported in, because then that is a damage to the environment and also a damage to that plant as well. So that is something to bear in mind. If we are going to order things in, it's important to know where we are getting them from. But generally speaking, you are not less of a practitioner because you're working with what you've got. And if you want to work with herbs that you can get in your kitchen or specialized herbs that you get from an occult shop, doesn't make you any less of a practitioner. And it doesn't mean that your magic's not going to work either. I think that's the other thing that people say is that your magic's not going to be successful but if it works for you and you are doing what you can to make your magic work, that's all that matters. I actually had so many unpopular opinions that I'm going to split this into a second video. So in a few weeks, I'm going to be posting the other half of these opinions. But in the meantime, feel free to post your own unpopular opinions in the comment section. But just before I go, I wanted to mention my own unpopular opinion, and it kind of ties in with the last one. If we are going to be buying items for our magical practice, we need to be making sure that we are not causing harm by purchasing that item. Now, that doesn't mean we need to be buying really, really expensive custom items. It just means that we need to be mindful of where we're sourcing things. If the price of something is way cheaper than you would expect, there's probably a reason for that. Is it because the people that are working in that factory are not being paid a living wage? Is it because they're not being paid at all? Is it because the mine that those crystals are coming from is not paying its workers or is unsafe for its workers? Is it because they're not putting anything back into the environment to sustain that area? It might also be that the item you're getting isn't actually from the creator you think it's from. They might be ripped off from an actual artist and being resold and distributed in unsafe environments that's not actually funding the artist that created it. Especially when we're working with the energy of something, these things are all really important to consider. And ultimately, at the end of the day, you don't need any items to practice witchcraft. They're additions. They can help you get into the right headspace. They can help you add energy into that situation. But we can also make things for ourselves, harvest things ourselves, and work with our own energy and the energy of our place, the spirits around, and the nature around us to magnify our spells and rituals, without potentially having detrimental impacts on the lives, the livelihoods, and the environment of people that probably live halfway across the world. Now, I understand that not everyone has the money to be buying really, really expensive items, but there's so much that we can make and create ourselves. You don't have to be really artistic either. If you want a wand, a stick that you find on the ground, especially if you can figure out the tree that it came from and the magical properties of that tree, that is a perfectly functional wand. It doesn't need to be something fancy. It doesn't need to be made of crystal or made of a certain type of wood. It's just something that you can work with and direct your energy through. If you want to work with plants, your natural environment has so much that you can learn about, that you can work with, harvest, form connections with plant allies and spirits. If you want to work with your ancestors or the spirits of place, that's something you can do without any items. It really doesn't have to be expensive. There are so many DIYs that we can do that will, if anything, strengthen our magical practice further. So with that being said, I hope that you did enjoy this video. If you did, feel free to give it a like. It really means a lot to me. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to post them down in the comment section. And if you do enjoy the magical content on this channel or in this video, feel free to hit subscribe. I try to post magical content every single week. So with that being said, I hope you had a magical, marvelous day. I hope you had an amazing Samhain, and I will see you in the next video. Bye! Move you in here and lift this up and So I realised it had been months since I last did an Unpopular Opinions video, and when I went through the list of unpopular opinions, it was massive. There were so many. So if you've posted an unpopular opinion, I'm sorry if I didn't get around to it. There were just a lot, so this is just like, you can't even really see this. The highlighted bits are the opinions. And, oh, fireworks. And everything else is me answering said opinions. I'm not really sure why I decided to do this, considering that by the time I actually film this video, I will just be going off what the opinion is. Oh, it's a funky colour. Hang on, I've got to try and fix this. Focus on the blue, focus on the blue, focus on the blue. That didn't work, did it? Focus on the screen, focus on the screen, focus on the screen. And it's still kind of yellow. Gosh darn, what about book? Focus on the yellow of the book. That's right, the yellow of the book. That actually worked. Okay, I gotta try that one again. That is what I'm gonna have to use in the future going forwards. I also got one of these, which is like the most unnecessary purchase ever, right? It was Halloween. This glows in the dark. It glows in the dark. It's so cool. Pretty certain it's terrible for my health, but you know what? I need to drink more water, and this is forcing me to drink more water. Good soup. Okay, because what tends to happen is as the filming goes on, I start shrinking because I'm sitting on the most uncomfortable sofa imaginable. So uncomfortable. Necklace in, necklace out. Well, necklace is out either which way. Whoa. What has happened here? There we go. Necklace is going to have to be out then because there's holes in my shirt. Why does this look like that? What? Okay. Big stretch. I feel like if I were a cat, everyone would say that. Big stretch. I'm procrastinating, starting.